It is I, Casualty. Today I will be continuing on with my World War I series. We will be starting off with discussing my amazing artwork I showed off last episode. Let's get right onto it. The piece of propaganda I made last episode shows a picture of three people doing what looks like smiling. This gives the impression that war is like a fun day out with the lads, and it will be an adventure of a lifetime. We know that this propaganda worked because a large amount of people joined the army to serve their country. The government used many tactics to get people to join the army. One of the main ways they did this was with the PALS battalion system. This system was put in place to allow people who lived in the same area or town or city to be in the same area in the trenches when they signed up. So for example, if a group of people signed up from London, those people from London would be put together while fighting. This would further develop the idea that was as an adventure with your friends. These groups were called battalions, and the fact that you normally signed up with friends or pals, they decided to call it PALS battalions. Topic of recruitment. Let's talk about the next way the army recruited new men. This method is called conscription. Later into the war, more and more people learned of the horrors of war and the sheer amount of people that had died, and none of them wanted to join. Which is quite understandable. The only reason people joined in the first place is because they were lied to and manipulated by the PALS battalion system and propaganda. Also being told lies in school, such as teachers saying things like, "Oh, didn't we always win the last war?" This puts a false sense of security on everyone because they are told that they have won every war. This type of teaching isn't right because of situations like Private George Morgan. It persuades them to join the army and doesn't explain the horrors of war. Another reason people joined the army is because they thought it was their opportunity to see the world, such as situations like Alfred Blake. Alfred joined the army because he quote had a dead-end job in a dead-end town and he quote wanted to see the world. He exclaimed that he quote hadn't the money to travel, so to him, this was his only opportunity to travel the world. Back to the fighting. The chief of staff of the Austrian-Hungary army is called Konrad von Hotzendorf. Although he isn't the best military strategist, Austria-Hungary constantly ignore Germany's advice on where to attack and stuff, then come running back to Germany whenever they get in a pinch. Austria-Hungary even get their butts handed to them by Serbia, who repel all invasion attempts at the beginning of the war. There was better news for Germany in the north though, because they almost completely destroy Russia's Second Army. Back on the Western Front, Germany was moving quickly towards Paris, and was getting very close to winning the war with a quick coup. The French commander-in-chief, Joseph Joffre, knew they had to do something. So he ordered his army to stop retreating. As a result of the battle, a gap opened up in the German lines. If a gap opens up, your enemy can use it to flank you from the side and encircle you. So the Germans had to retreat. The Allies launched a counter-attack and the Germans dug into defensive positions called trenches, and the Allies quickly follow suit. Here's how trench warfare works. Two trenches with no man's land in the middle of nowhere. One side will bombard the opposition with heavy gunfire and artillery shells. Then they rush across no man's land trying to overthrow the enemy trench. The opposition will unload machine gun fire on the attackers until they are all killed or the trench is overrun. It's amazing that soldiers put up with these conditions for years. The trenches were absolutely disgusting. Pools of poisonous water, mud, rats, diseases as more made up the conditions in the trenches. Props to the soldiers who were ordered to deal with this for so long. Something that women did during the war was give men white feathers. They gave white feathers to men who weren't taking part in the war to shame them for not fighting for our country. Although this happened so often, it became a problem because some soldiers were getting white feathers when they were just generals taking a break and going to get some tea. Not coffee, as if anyone would drink that hot mud. If you think that coffee is better than tea, well, I have something to tell you. Ding dong, your opinion is wrong. The Christmas truce took place in 1914. The Christmas truce is one of the most well-remembered events in the First World War, where men from both sides ceased fire to greet each other on no man's land and meet the enemy. Since it was Christmas, Generals knew that this would be some men's first holiday away from home. So they had gifts handed out to the men. On the German side, all men retrieved a gift from the Kaiser, cigarette boxes for NCOs, and a pipe with the Crown Prince on it for the ranks. The British received a brass box from Princess Mary filled with cigarettes, tobacco, a Christmas card and sweets. There were personal packages from home given to soldiers, some of which included plum puddings and a bunch of cigarettes. After the bad weather stopped, gunfire completely ceased in the trenches. The German side started putting lit-an bomb on the top of their trenches, which the British at first thought was the start of an attack. Then the Germans started singing Silent Night. I mean the original Austrian version of Silent Night. Sir Edward Hulse from the British side ordered the British troops to start singing Silent Night to challenge the Germans, but eventually both sides joined in harmoniously. After this, the men began shouting Christmas greetings to the opposition. The sides began to move out of the trenches to talk to the enemy. This truce began to spread all the way down the entire British line. Officers from both sides decided to cease fire the next day on Christmas, but continue at a certain exact time. Keep in mind that not every area along the trenches were all happy and celebratory. Some officers responded to Christmas carols with machine gun fire. Agreements from both sides were made to bury their dead in services. As well as that, both sides loafed around on no man's land, handing each other gifts and trading food to try, like chocolate cake for barrels of beer, and showing pictures of family back home. They exchanged hats, even gave each other haircuts and just generally talked. Both sides were equally sick of war. Both sides were curious about what the enemy was like, and they were quick to realize that the enemies weren't what the propaganda and the government were telling them. They weren't monsters. They were humans, just like themselves. Let me tell you, I sure feel out of place here. What everyone remembers about the truce is the game of football both sides had, which ended up as Germany 2. England 1. If I was on the English side, boy oh boy would the truce have ended right there and then. Of course the truce couldn't go on forever. Pictures were making their way into the press and the governments were quickly to discover the truce. Governments dispatched senior officers to threaten the soldiers to restart the war and end the truce. The Christmas truce then never happened again,